Hi, this is Writer to Writer. I'm your host, Charlie Patton. With me today is Randy Wayne Wright, novelist and essayist. You've got a new novel out, Shark River, Randy, which I believe is your 8th novel, right?
It's my 8th. First of all, I've got to apologize for my name. It's the worst name in the world. It's impossible to say. Randy Wayne White. And I myself usually say Randy Rain Wright. So,
is that what I just said?
Randy no, you did it very well, but I was so dumb I didn't even say it out loud before I decided to use it as my writing name.
And there's a famous football player named Randy White who you're probably often confused with.
He's even big, much bigger than I am, far tougher, so I thought, I'm Randy White, he's Randy White. I'll be Randy Wayne White, but it's tough to say.
Now let's talk about, we were talking earlier, you're 50 years old, and you've been a professional writer for, in terms of books, for 10 years. Your first book was published about 10 years ago. Yeah. Before that, I know for a while you were a professional fishing guide. Was that something you were doing to put money on the table while you tried to become a writer? Or?
It was, yeah. I was never called to fishing.
Okay.
But I was a guide on Sanibel, Tarpon Bay Marina, for more than 13 years.
Right.
Well, actually, Tarpon Bay for 11 and a half, and then I continued to guide for another.
Which is important to your writing because that's the background of your Doc Ford novels.
About a marine biologist named Doc Ford who lives on a stilt house on Sanibel Island in a fictional bay called Dinkins Bay, which is actually Tarpon Bay, where I did more than 3,000 charters. And the most common question asked of me when I was guiding was, don't you get tired of taking out all those jerks from the north?
Right.
And my reply was honest. I don't know. I don't take out any jerks. And that was the truth.
Okay.
The people I took out in those 3,000 trips, many of whom, or at least some of whom, are still friends of mine, I came to adore. And I like the people very, very much. And if there's anything I miss in guiding, it's two things. One, the people, and two, being on the water at first light. I miss that.
Right. Now, but you're still able to spend a lot of time around people, and you're able to be on the water at first light. So,
well, I don't spend much time around people. I live on the water. I've got a great old house, as you know, up on an Indian mound on a National Archaeological Preserve on an island right on the water.
Right.
And I've got a flat skiff exactly like the one that my main character Doc Ford has.
Who's a marine biologist.
He's a marine biologist, although his is probably neater.
And he's a marine biologist who somehow ends up being a detective in each and every novel.
Well, not really a detective. When I started to write these books, the first book was Sanibel Flats, I simply came up with characters I found intellectually and emotionally interesting, and I put them in circumstances that demanded that they react. And so who knows, I don't think he's a detective, but he certainly gets involved in interesting things.
Correct, right. You've been compared to John D. MacDonald, probably because you write about somebody who lives on the water in Florida, but also because I think there's an underlying ecological theme perhaps to some of your stories which you would share with MacDonald. I mean, there's a love of nature obviously going on there. And how do you react to that? Was he somebody you modeled yourself on at all?
Well, I knew John MacDonald, and I like John MacDonald, and I can tell you that I am no John D. MacDonald. I wish I were.
Right.
But it's hugely flattering that anyone wouldn't make any connection whatsoever. In my novels, I try to have different strata of themes or threads that run throughout the books. And certainly, if you write about Florida, without a doubt, if you write about 2 people in Florida, you're dealing with 3 very strong characters. Let's put it that way. And so the things I saw and experienced during those years when I was on the water and came to love are, to me, an important part of the books.
Right. Florida, in a lot of ways, has replaced Southern California, I guess, as the contemporary setting for the mystery novel. I mean, you've got Carl Hyacin, James Hall. Before that, you had MacDonald and Elmer Leonard, and there's Tim Dorsey, right?
Tim is terrific, yeah.
Why has that happened? Why has Florida become such a wonderful setting for the mystery novel?
Well, I can't speak for the others, but my guess is that most of those fellows really used a lot of drugs early on in their career. I'm kidding, of course. I like Carl and James and Tim very much. And, they're all good friends of mine. I don't know. It is a mystery quite literally.
Well, do you think there's an underlying corruption in the state, maybe that?
Florida certainly attracts predators.
Right.
And Florida has, I've always had this theory that when kids are in junior high school, or what they now call middle school, they spend particularly the spring portion of their days in classroom, in the heat and in the boredom, oftentimes looking at a map of the United States on the wall, as many classrooms have. And there is Florida dangling down this penile,
right.
symbolic thing, and it probably in some subconscious way maybe affects them, and so they go on to become adults and they want to read about Florida. I truly don't know, but it is, you do book signings in California, New Orleans, or wherever, and Florida writers have a gigantic following, but why, we're lucky, I don't have a clue.
Okay. Talk about becoming a writer. How long was becoming a writer a goal of yours? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Charlie, I grew up in rural areas. I was in 4-H, and as you know, I love to play baseball. I still play a little men's baseball.
Right.
But from the age of 11 or 12, I wanted to be a writer, and why, I do not know. We didn't have a TV, so books became my form of indoor recreation.
Who were the writers that were firing your imagination at that point?
Well, Samuel Clemens was terrific. Wonderful writer. I came early on to the Transcendentalists for whatever reason. I was a terrible student, and I didn't go to college, and for good reason. I didn't deserve to go to college. But early on, I came to like Emerson very, very much. It had a massive influence in my life. That all greatness, all power, all goodness, all greatness comes from the individual, not from the group. But I found books to be so magical at that age. I believed, or I wanted to believe, that if I could write one, perhaps I could become part of that magic. But I never for an instant thought I was smart enough, and that was true clear up until the time I wrote my first book.
Did you try your hand first at fiction or at nonfiction?
I started writing on my own, working hard at being a writer, writing fiction when I got out of high school, probably when I was in high school. And again, I cannot figure out why I got such bad grades, I don't know. But working hard at it then, and I wanted to be a writer. And worked briefly for the Fort Myers newspaper, which was a wonderful experience. Right. Journalism's terrific, and that was essentially my college education. I learned so much. People in newspapers, or in the media, every day they are called upon to switch gears and research something new, talk to different people in different fields. It's a wonderful education. And but in '74, I got my captain's license. I'm pretty old, aren't I, Charlie?
Yeah.
I know. You're going to be 52.
I'm the same age as you are,
so
that's right.
Well, I told you, when I turned 50, I lost all my hair. Up until then, phew, beautiful, wavy.
So mine's going insane.
Yeah, I was a good-looking man. I shrunk about 4 inches, too. It's pathetic. But started guiding part-time in '75 and then full-time in '77. And I would get up, if I did not have a charter, and write in the morning. And if I did have a charter, I would stay up late at night and write, working very hard at it. That's the most difficult thing to me about writing is this. I like people, and I adore my sons, and they were young then.
Right.
The most difficult thing is you have to go into a room alone,
right,
and close the door without excuse. If you have children, that's not an excuse. If you have a job, that is not an excuse. If you are tired, that is not an excuse. If you wait until you have time, I'll tell you where your books will be. They will not be published. That's where your books will be.
Okay.
So I tried not to fall for my own excuses, and I'm great at making excuses, but during those years as a guide, I worked hard at writing.
Were you trying to place your fiction at that point? Were you sending it off to people, or were you just trying to write something?
Sure. I sent off short stories to Esquire. Short stories are very tough. Very few people publish them. Playboy, the few places that published them, and would occasionally get handwritten notes back.
Right.
Yeah, in 1978, Rolling Stone founded Outside Magazine, and I saw the first issue. It was a beautiful magazine cover. It was lovely, and they had writers like Thomas McGuane and Jim Harrison and Peter Matheson. I thought, golly, what a great magazine. Absolutely. So I just sent in a I wrote a story. I'd paddled a canoe from Pine Island near Fort Myers down to Key Largo, which is a pretty long trip.
Right.
And I just sent the story in, self-addressed, stamped envelope, didn't know anybody, had a phone number. About a month and a half later, got a call at the marina at Tarpon Bay at noon at lunch. It was Terry MacDonald, who was then the editor. And I think Terry now is the editor of maybe Esquire, I can't remember. And Terry was a very gruff guy, he still is. And he goes, "This is Randy White?" And I said, "Yes, it is." He goes, "We can't use this story." I said, "Oh, well, geez, thanks for calling, you know. Because you don't understand, we'd like you to try something else." And I published with Outside Magazine that first year, and they really kept me in the game because I was fishing full time.
Right.
And if I didn't write something for them, if 6 or 7 months went by, Terry would call me, or John Rasmus, and then Mark Bryant. They would call me and say, "Hey, what's the deal here, pal? We need a little something for the cause. You need to write," you know. And they really
And
kept
then
me on it.
you wrote for them for a long time. I know.
Yeah.
Bat Fishing in the Rainforest
Yeah.
is a collection of mainly those pieces. Is that right?
Stuff I did for Playboy and Outside and a couple other magazines.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was published in 1991, after
Right.
your first novel had been published.
Boy, you're good. I've forgotten this.
Well, I've got
But
it all
then
written down.
I'm a year
right
older
here.
than you, so I'm old.
So obviously that must have given you confidence about your fiction to be able to successfully place some nonfiction, or did it?
It did. I was in hindsight, I was so extraordinarily lucky to write for the people I did. But in terms of writing, I don't know. I don't think I've ever had confidence. I don't know many writers who do. You're out there operating without a net.
Now you're truly in the nonfiction I've read, you're the classic participatory journalist. You go out and do something interesting and then write a story about what it was like. Is that part of it fun? The doing of it fun?
It's pretty fun. I was never a good athlete, and I'm essentially kind of a klutz and a screw up. Aside from that, it can be quite fun.
Okay. Well, I mean, you said you're not a good athlete, but you were good enough to get a tryout for professional baseball, which is way better than I was.
That was a long time ago, but
Okay.
I was not good enough to make it.
Right.
But I did catch for a month and a half in the professional senior league in the bullpen.
Right.
I caught some great pitchers like
Wrote a
Doug
wonderful
Bird
story about that I
for
read.
Playboy, Bill Lee, and some great guys. And I still catch in Florida. Well, we're in Florida now. Some of the major league alumni games, and I'll catch some of the great pitchers.
And you've just
all the
come
time.
back from a trip to Cuba playing.
My
senior
old man's
baseball.
team, we played 3 games baseball in
Right.
Cuba. Bill Spaceman Lee used to pitch for Boston. He was one of our pitchers.
Right.
John Warden pitched for Detroit, one of the funniest human beings on earth. We played 3 games down there. John charmed he just charmed everyone. We're growing. He's 54, 55 years old, so people at our age were pretty mature and respectful, and he charmed everyone in Cuba by taking a fart machine. It was a little thing, it's a little box he carries in his pocket, and he presses a little button to makes this horrible noise. So yeah, we did well in Cuba.
Okay, that's good. American culture in Cuba.
It's sad but true.
Is writing nonfiction for magazines, is that a good way to go for a writer? Is it a way to make a living, or is it just a way to get your foot in the door?
Well, it's a great way to go. It's very competitive. There aren't many magazines that pay enough to make it worthwhile, but it's hugely competitive. But if you can do it, that's the way to go. One thing that I find appealing about writing, there are a number of things. This is one. Again, I did not go to college. I have no qualifications whatsoever, as I prove almost on a daily basis. But in writing, it does not matter where you went to college. It does not matter what color you are. It does not matter who you are. If a magazine comes to have confidence enough in you to say, we're going to invest $10,000 in expenses and plus your fee, plus this and that, they're going to hire you. They're going to hire you. And there aren't many writers that editors trust to that extent.
Is there a particular piece that is your favorite among the nonfiction stuff that you've done?
You know what? Once I write something, Charlie, I don't go back.
Right.
I have 2 collections of essays out: Bat Fishing in the Rainforest and The Sharks of Lake Nicaragua, and they're putting out a 3rd, which I may call Last Flight Out. But I was rereading some stories, and I thought, geez, some of these aren't too bad. You know?
Right.
But other than that, I don't reread them too much.
Okay. Let's talk about how your novels came about. Your character Doc Ford. When did Doc begin to emerge in your mind as as the character you were going to write about?
Well, I knew I wanted to take place around the water because I was a fishing guide. My marina, Tarpon Bay Marina, closed in 1987.
Okay.
So I was essentially out of a full-time billet. So I thought a marine biologist because that's one of my hobbies and occasionally a passion. And I believe that we're all made up of two basic cerebral components, one of which is linear, mathematical, unsympathetic, pragmatic, and the other of which is purely intuitive, empathetic, spiritual. And those two things are often at conflict in me. And I thought it might be interesting to have one character who was purely linear and mathematical, another character who was purely spiritual and intuitive. So I came up with Doc Ford, the marine biologist, the mathematical guy, and Tomlinson, this
drug-addled
hipster
Right.
who is purely intuitive, who converses with aliens in distant universes, but is also quite a brilliant guy. And I took those two characters whom I found emotionally and intellectually interesting, and I put them in conflict, and I just let the characters go.
And you had them in a place called Dinkins Bay Marina, which I take it is very similar to the Tarpon Bay Marina.
It's Tarpon Bay Marina, right, yeah. And some of the characters, I know too many lawyers to say much more, but...
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're able to sort of relive the fun years of being the fishing guide and at the same time develop adventures for these characters. Is that a good way of putting it? Or?
Yeah, my novels all start in Florida.
Right.
And sometimes zoom off to far-flung places, all of which I've been, Sumatra and Vietnam and Colombia. But another thing I enjoy much about the writing, and I hope readers enjoy it, is that it affords me the opportunity to come as close as I can on paper to capturing the days I spent on the water. The sights, the smells, the qualities and textures of light. I come as close as I can to capturing those things. And it's true also of the people at Tarpon Bay. Right. The people I loved and still love. The opportunity to capture them, to anchor them on paper is a wonderful thing. Right. And I try to do that in the books.
There's something that in both your essays and in your novels, there's a good sense of humor to most of what you write, which I enjoy. I mean, the interplay between Doc Ford and Tomlinson, it's a wonderful, funny undercurrent to that relationship that I'm sure you're aware of as a writer, but probably comes naturally to you, I would think.
Nothing in writing comes naturally to me, man. Okay. I'll tell you what, it's a pain in the rump. Well, thank you very much. I tend to think that if a day goes by that something funny doesn't happen, right. That's an unusual day. You want to jump in the Jeep and go look for it. And right. When I read books, and I rarely read novels, but when I used to read novels, if there wasn't something funny that happened at all, I'm thinking this book doesn't have much credibility. If it's one person dying after another, and right. It's usually
Why
something. Why
don't you read
funny.
Novels very often?
Now?
Yeah.
I don't want to steal anything accidentally.
Don't want to be influenced.
I don't want to be accidental.
Okay.
Yeah. Like Carl Hyacin, he's a good friend of mine, and Dr. James Hall, who is kind of a pain in the butt, but still a decent guy. No, I like Jim very much.
Right, okay.
And Tim Dorsey, they're all, I like him very much. And Ace Atkins, he's a very nice fellow. But I just don't read their books because we write about the same thing, and I don't know if they read mine. I don't blame them if they don't.
Right.
But I just don't.
Okay. So what do you read?
Nonfiction. That's what I read. I love biology and I love history. I just got a new telescope. I live in an old house with no TV, and I got a shortwave radio, and so I just read nonfiction.
Now you've talked a lot about how writing is work for you.
Yeah.
Talk about how do you write on a typewriter? Do you write on a computer? What do you do?
I'm a two-finger typist. I wrote Sanibel Flats on a black Underwood stand-up typewriter, and now I've got this rocket ship of a laptop computer, and I've got big hands, and because I'm a two-finger typist, I have an iBook Macintosh because the keys are bigger.
Right.
So I make fewer mistakes. I type on that. And my schedule, when I'm home, it's consistent, and I like it. I get up in the morning, I make coffee, really good coffee, I walk out in the dock, see what fish are around, make sure my boat's not sinking. Walk back in the house, reread what I wrote the day before, completely edit it, and then re-edit it. And then that's usually noon, and I go out and I swim laps, or I go for a walk, or I run up and down steps, or maybe lift weights, although I usually do that later in the day. And then I come back and I do my writing. And at the beginning of each day, at the top of the page, I write the words to date. I write my goal for the day in terms of writing, in terms of working out, whether I want to drink or not. I write my weight sometimes, because I'm kind of a chunky old guy. And then I do not stop until my words are done.
And will the number of words you set as your goal that day vary according to the day, or?
Yeah, I don't want to fail to reach my goal, so I try to make it reasonable. Usually it's 1,000 words, 1,000, 1,500, yeah, usually that.
All right.
But if I know, I get a lot, my house is very public, a lot of people know where I live, and they're increasingly people are stopping by, and I get a ton of phone calls. And
Do you use your computer to do research as you're writing?
yeah,
Do you go
what an
online?
amazing time.
Right.
I mean, just
Yeah.
the internet is,
Right.
it's an astounding time to live. I mean, we are so lucky. I just got back from Cuba. People in this nation, and I learned that writing for outside, I would go to these third world hellholes, which I enjoy. Cambodia and Vietnam, Nicaragua during the war, and you realize what an extraordinary treasure we have in this republic. I mean, it's extraordinary. No matter what your politics are, God bless you. As long as you have an interest or a passion for one side or the other, God bless you. And the internet's amazing.
Right, because there's a lot of biological information, a lot of geographical information packed into your novels. You obviously have to do some research. I mean,
Well, Charlie, you're a writer. Whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, if you make one factual error, you have forfeited the credibility of your writing to the reader. I mean, if they catch you in one factual error, you've lost your credibility. And so I take it very seriously. And I've made. I'm human. I'm all too human, but I've made some factual errors, and I hate it.
how long will you spend on a book? What's the typical amount of time?
It takes about 14 months.
About 14 months to finish.
And in the course of the 14 months, I'll also write a couple of magazine pieces for Men's Journal or Outside, or I write 6 days a week. If I'm not playing baseball, if I haven't been up over serving myself with beer the night before, I'll get my writing done.
Okay. And now you're embarked on a part of the job that a lot of writers hate, but you told me you like, which is you're out touring on behalf of your book.
I don't like it. I love it.
Right.
It's much easier than writing. What a pain in the butt writing is. And I like people. I get to meet people, and writing is lonely. It's very lonely work.
Right.
And you go into the room and you do your work. At the end of 14 months, you have this thing about this thick, and you don't have a clue. I don't have a clue whether it's any good. And almost invariably, when I first reread the entire book, I go, "Good Lord, what a noxious piece of crap this is." It's just.
This is your reaction the first time?
I almost get teary-eyed. It's so bad. I've invested this year, more than a year, and then you send it off, and sometimes it's not crap, and you think badly of yourself. But
do you always think it's bad, even when you?
Almost every book. There's one of the readings. I go, "Oh Lord, I may change my name and leave town after this one."
And then you gradually come to see that maybe it's
Well,
not that bad.
knock on wood, all my books have just gotten really good reviews. I think
You've
I've
got
had
wonderful reviews, yeah.
I think I've had 2 bad reviews.
Yeah. I told you my friend Ann Hyman, who was the retired book editor of the Times Union, says you're the best writer in Florida. You asked me to repeat that during the interview. So.
Yeah, and I'll give you the $5 a little later.
Thank you.
You mean my auntie?
Yes, Aunt Ann. What is it? I mean, you're just a people person. I mean, is that why you don't mind? A lot of people just hate the idea of going to 27 cities. Is that how many you're going to go to in this tour?
Yeah, 23 cities and shucks. 27 cities in 23 days, yeah.
27 cities in 23
Well,
days.
dyslexic.
And you wake up and you're not sure what city you're in, and you don't know who this person is that you're having breakfast with.
I like it a lot.
You like that, yeah.
If there's one thing I've learned in my misspent life, it's that our lives are important, and people are important.
Right.
We all have a tale and a
Now,
word.
will you read the reviews as they come out?
Yeah, I read all the reviews, and the ones that are not kind, I pretend like I haven't read them. I go, "Oh, they said what?" Baloney. I never read reviews.
You don't. You do. You don't.
I do, but I lie about it.
Okay.
If they're
Do you find that valuable at all? I mean, has a review ever helped you in any way?
I'm trying to think. They've mostly been really good. No, I don't think they have.
Right, right.
I hope they keep writing them though, but don't.
You want them to keep reviewing it. Do you show your manuscript to other people as you're writing it?
Never.
You never do.
That's not true. One of my best friends is a brilliant heart surgeon, a guy named Brian Hummel. I'll let him read some stuff, and occasionally one or two other friends. But
And do you have an editor that you trust that you work
Neil
with?
Nyron at Putnam's is wonderful.
Okay.
At Outside, I was blessed with having great editors, one of whom is Hampton Sides. He's just coming out with a book called Ghost Soldiers, which is going to do great. But Neil Nyron at Putnam's is wonderful. He will go, I'll send him the book, like say on a Friday. Saturday night he will call me, or Saturday afternoon. He'll go, you need to cut this, this, and this. And the first time he did it, I cut this and this, and I sent it back. He said, I said, cut this, this, and this. You just cut this and this. I said, yeah, but I really like this part. He goes, I do too, but you need to cut it. I cut it. And he has a great sensibility for that. And it's always very simple. You just cut this, and that's the editing. You know, it's not much.
So a good editor is a good thing to have.
Oh, it's huge. Someone you trust.
Right.
Yeah, somebody you trust, because boy, there are some bad editors out there. There are, and I've heard some nightmare stories about, oh, you need to rewrite this completely, and then they get their hand in the rewriting, and that's where the real trouble is, because there is a mysterious quality in a good novel, I think, and the quality is tone, and I can't define it. A good novel, one time it took me a month and a half to get the first paragraph of book done, because I had not found the tone of the voice. And when another person puts their hand into the writing, it's like a bell going off when you read it.
Right.
And I see it in magazine articles. But
I'm going to have to stop you here. We're out of time, but I've enjoyed it. This is Charlie Patton with Randy Wayne Wright and Writer to Writer. Randy Wayne White.
Wendy Wayne White, Elma Fudd.
Randy Wayne White.
Thank you.